Cheers. Welcome to Culture Night,
where each week we drink fancy wine and watch movies that are in some way culturally significant. I'm Andrew.
And I'm Sarah, and we are back for Season 4, Episode 4 of our science fiction season. And again, just chugging right along.
Yep. Do we have any podcast business tonight?
I don't think so.
We haven't had any business in a while.
I know. I mean, at first it was like getting all set up, people getting to know us. But, you know, deep into Season 4, we've kind of found our groove.
Yeah, nothing new. People haven't really given us any comments, hint, on any of our videos. So we don't really have any feedback to discuss. So
yeah, unless the people listening care that I moved the roadcaster from in front of us to the side of us.
Oh, yeah, they are.
The people watching obviously noted that as soon as they started watching.
Yeah.
But that's about the only business we have today.
Well, let's move into the real business of what are we drinking this week?
This week we are drinking the Tobin James 2020 French Camp Vineyard Zinfandel. Everybody's favorite year.
Ooh, there's a lot of text on the back. Let's see if they give us any sort of tasting notes for it. Every year, this vineyard shows a consistency and uniqueness unto itself. Others say it was always wild, brambly, peppery, raspberry, and dark berry characteristics.
I get the pepper on the nose. It's like a dry smell.
Let me go ahead and check it out. Got a slight cold, for those of you that can tell, and see how it hampers my olfactories. Ooh, I can already smell it, so not much. Oh, yeah, definitely get the peppery.
Yeah, I was trying to put a word to it, and then you read the note, and I was like, that's what it is. It's definitely not as fruit forward as a lot of the other wines.
Like strawberry jam.
A little sour, but not a lot of complexity. Pretty simple.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to describe it. Kind of juicy, bold. Not too terribly thick, but pretty good. Yeah.
I enjoy it. And I feel like, at a certain point, I'm like, oh my gosh, all these wines taste the same. We're just drinking all this nice wine. Life's so hard. No, can I really tell a difference anymore? But this feels different from a lot of the other weeks.
Yeah, it's a good wine that I feel like could really just stand alone by itself. It's just a good drinking wine.
A fire pit wine.
Oh, very good.
Would have been perfect on a night like tonight.
Right.
Anyways, I guess now that we've gotten into the wine, it's time to go behind the screens. Where each week we go behind the big screens of Hollywood and dive deeper into some aspect of film, production, or storytelling. What are we doing tonight?
So tonight we are revisiting remastering. So we've covered that in a previous behind the screens of talking about how they take the, actual film, go through, find the master copy of it, rebase it for whatever medium it's going to be on, maybe clean up a little bit. If there's any visual effects, go ahead and change that, upgrade it so it doesn't look out of place to have a really low quality CGI in a very high quality 4K rendering. However, as we've kind of seen for the past 2 weeks, sometimes that can go very wrong.
Someone's still a little hurt about it.
So the first one, I'll get to this in a second. We talked about the Star Wars ones, but last week with E.T., something that was much more subtle, but also made people very angry as well, were some of the changes that they made when they re-released it as a remaster in 2002 for the 20th anniversary. Steven Spielberg had gotten a bunch of feedback from parental groups that were angry about it, whatever. So he decided to change. So all of the agents that are running around chasing E.T. at the end, they all had guns in the version that we watched. And in the remaster, they changed those out with walkie-talkies.
Ooh, that very much
which
tracks.
Not really menacing, not really as scary, and change some of the dialogue to be a little bit less harsh, the way the kids were talking, but that's kind of how kids talk. So people got really, really angry because they had their memories of, what E.T. was, and them being so scared of oh my gosh, they're chasing them around with all these guns, they're going to get shot. And that actual, fears, memories people actually had. So when they watched it, they're that's not E.T. It's not what I know. And so later when they re-released it as on DVD, now that was becoming more popular, Steven Spielberg had a lot of regrets with that. And so he insisted that they release it as a 2-disc DVD so that people could have both versions.
Ooh, interesting.
The remaster where they just kind of cleaned up, some of the space shots for the stars, made it look a little bit better, some of the slight special effects, and visual effects, I should say, and not too much more. And he said, then I realized what I had done. I had robbed the people who loved E.T. of their memories of E.T. because he just, went beyond just simple cleaning up of that.
It's also interesting that was something that parent groups brought up back in 2002. It seems something that would be a super hot topic now, but that seems like, ahead of the times.
I mean, I could see people being angry and being like, oh, I wanted to show this to my kids, but I didn't really want them seeing much of guns and violence. But I didn't really think of this movie as having a lot of guns and violence. There was some guns, which you would think like some special forces people that are hunting aliens might have, but it's not like they were shooting around, people getting shot up and bloodied that you would think would really anger people.
Relatively tame.
Like, watch it with maybe some parental guidance,
isn't that why it's rated PG?
Right. But then moving on to Star Wars, which got people a lot more angry, as you would imagine.
If you listen to season 4, episode 2, you can tell he was upset.
All over online of people that are just like pointing out all the various changes. Like, people have poured over every single frame of every single version of it. And it's actually changed several times. They didn't just remaster it one time. It seems like George Lucas, every time they release it for a new box set or a new anniversary edition, changes more of it, which gets people even more angry. He's changed things like the title crawl, like we saw, adding in A New Hope and changing that a little bit and changing kind of some slight effects of that. They added the aliens outside of Mos Eisley on Tatooine when they're about to go to that pub. That was where I first really noticed some pretty jarring changes, because people were angry with that one, because the first time you really see a lot of the aliens is supposed to be in the cantina when they're at the bar seeing all those various things. And by introducing them outside of that, it kind of took away that shock value of being in there amongst all of them. And then adding the Jabba the Hutt scene. Like I said, originally that entire part wasn't even in there, but they've redone that a couple times to make it look different depending on which, like when the prequels came out, that model of Jabba, they kind of inserted into there. But more divisively, they also changed the scene where Han shoots Greedo under the table, because people were very angry about who shot first. And sometimes in some versions, Han shoots first. In others, Greedo shoots first, and in some, they shoot at the same time.
You shouldn't be allowed to change things that much.
Those are pretty like significant things that people have gotten angry about and had like some stakes on.
Pick one and stick with it.
But I think it's also probably made people go crazy and probably gotten some pretty like bitter arguments when their version has one way and another has another way, and people like don't realize how much it's actually been changing.
That's wild. I just don't think I ever realized that movies were changed that much. That's so crazy.
Rewriting history, especially something so classic and so like culturally significant. I feel like once a movie is in like the National Library, whatever of Congress, you shouldn't be able to modify it anymore.
Yeah.
Should just be that's the version. And I kind of am mostly upset because I want to see like what the state of sci-fi was at that time. And like maybe you can take what was projected, what they captured then, and maybe blow it up to a higher quality medium, because film, you can actually do that without losing any quality. But I don't really appreciate how they are changing things, because it doesn't give me a sense of what was possible at that time.
And that's something I've really come to appreciate from this podcast is we're watching these movies, we're looking for certain things, and to watch how film has grown, how CGI and visual effects, special effects, all that has grown, how the genres themselves have grown and changed, that when they go back and change them
for dialogue.
Exactly. Even though a lot of that stuff is cringy now, it's still... It gives you an idea of what things were like back in that time. It's such a time capsule that when they change them, I just feel like, Steven Spielberg with E.T. That, I realized what I'd done. I'd robbed people of their memories. Like, you're robbing, like, people grew up watching these movies. They have very specific memories to a lot of these things, that to change that just seems so wrong.
Right. And they changed a whole bunch of arbitrary other things inside of Star Wars that just served no purpose. But anyways, it's like I said, kind of become its own thing is just how bad the remasterings have become. Like South Park and Family Guy have done a whole bunch of parodies on just those changes and pointed them out, like by breaking the fourth wall and other things. And it's gained its own term in the film industry called George Lucasing a film.
Don't you love how we like make things into verbs?
But he still does it to this day, which is crazy. Like, has not learned. But I guess when you're making that much money, you don't really care.
Yeah, doesn't really matter at that point. He's got, we need to look up his net worth, because I can't even imagine.
I mean, they sold Lucasfilms and everything to Disney, so probably
the Disney sale, I think, was $4 billion, I read somewhere. Jesus. Okay. Any other notes on remastering?
So, no, that's about all I got. But it was just fascinating reading more and more about these movies that we've seen recently, especially, and just how much they've changed.
That's so wild. And it'll be interesting to see if we keep noticing that, or you specifically keep noticing that as we keep watching more movies. All right, so with that, and kind of on a similar note, we're going to go into our Slept On It segment, where we are going to go back and revisit E.T. from last week. And does your rating change after sleeping on it? You rated it a 4.3, and I rated it a 6.2.
I'll give it a 4.5. Kind of, it wasn't as enjoyable for me, but I do like think more just the cultural significance and all the ET phone home and all the descriptions that we kind of have for like what an alien is, I think kind of points back to that. So I won't adjust it much. I still didn't really like it that much. I'm not really going to want to watch it until our kids are old enough to watch it with some parental guidance.
Good. You better.
I'll protect them from those walkie-talkies. And 4.5 is about all I can really do.
Yeah. I do kind of think my 6.2 is a little generous. I think I've enjoyed it the most of all the movies we've watched so far of this season. Just kind of has more of what I'm looking for in a movie, that like cozy family nostalgic feel to it, with obviously a little bit of science fiction, or a lot, but it still has that like setting in a reality that's
what's weird to me is I don't know how much I consider ET to be science fiction after thinking about it, because there wasn't really much science.
Yes, hold on to that for a second for one of my shallow dives. Fun facts. What did you call them? Fact snacks?
Fact snacks, yeah.
I enjoyed it, and I like look forward to watching it with our kids. I would probably watch it if it was on. I'm not probably going to quote it because I don't know it well enough to do that, and I think just the touch of culture that is continued on all these years later gave it maybe 5.8 if I were to adjust it a little bit. Okay, so now to get into my fact snacks, we're going to see if that one sticks.
Make it a thing.
I think you're going to try to make it a thing. Again, I just kind of look and see what behind the scenes fun facts I can find about the movie. And there was actually a lot on this one, but for everybody's sake, I didn't just read the whole article out loud because I knew I needed to limit it. But these were the ones that stuck out and were the most interesting to me. So first of all the doctors and the nurses that they show are real doctors and nurses because they wanted the medical terminology to sound natural. And I thought that was really cool. Yeah. I don't think that's often done.
I didn't think they really looked like your generic, like pretty doctor actors and actresses.
I thought the same thing.
Makes sense.
So I thought that was a really interesting fact.
No offense to those doctors.
I'm sure they're so offended. And 10% of the budget went to designing and building ET. I think I said that the budget for the movie was $10 million. So about $1 million went towards just the designing of the character and the costume and all of that.
Crazy because it didn't look like it was too elaborate of a little puppet.
I mean, maybe because it was 1982. That's why so much had to go to it, and just I guess multiple renderings. And I did read in something else too that there were most of the time it was a puppet, but there were certain ones where like a person would be inside the costume to do the movements. I guess based on the camera camera angles and stuff they needed to do. One of them I think said it was an 11-year-old boy that was doing it. So
wow.
That I guess that tracks for that time period, but that's crazy that so much went to a puppet, more or less. Fun fact, Harrison Ford was actually in E.T. as the school principal, but they ended up cutting his scenes.
I don't remember him seeing him in the cameo.
Right? And I just feel like, of this time period, he was in so many, or he's been in so many of the Culture Night movies that we've watched so far, and then he actually was supposed to be in this one, but ended up being cut, and he's just one of those actors at that time that just kind of went out for
I wonder if the deleted scene's out there somewhere.
We'll have to look for it. I know what we're doing after the movie tonight. I just thought that was interesting, like all these Culture Night movies that keep overlapping the cultural significance is that he just came back again. And actually this film was shot in chronological order, which I thought was really interesting. And they did that so that they could help
the kids.
Yes. The kids like build emotion and like grow more attached to him and to capture their emotions, which I feel like is really smart, especially for working with kids to help them kind of track those feelings as the character moves through their scenes and like learn how to portray them. I always
kind of thought that about like kids movies is like, especially ones where there's a lot of green screen or they have to use a lot of their imagination. Like you almost need like a psychopath kid to be able to actually do that
out of order.
Yeah. Accurately.
And I remember as a kid learning that they shot movies out of order, and my brain just like, it was like, nope, don't understand that. There's no way they can do that.
The first movie I ever heard that for was actually Sound of Music.
Oh, interesting.
Because I think the one where they dance in the gazebo is like the last scene that they shot for some reason. I remember mom telling me that and me being like, but why wouldn't they just shoot the last scene last?
Yeah, I don't have a specific memory, but I remember the feeling of like, but I just don't understand. So I thought that was really cool. Because you can tell the emotional growth of the characters is great. Back to this movie doesn't have a lot of sci-fi in it. The original title for this was A Boy's Life. So that's going like really not science fiction.
Just your average boy.
Yeah, just your average boy that finds an alien in his backyard, in the cornfield in his backyard.
Yeah, in LA.
So I thought that there's no way. I feel like the movie would not nearly be as popular if it went by a boy's life.
Yeah.
And then also
dumb name.
on one of the notes from your behind the screens of remastering, talking about Steven Spielberg and the DVDs and everything, he didn't want that originally. He did not want E.T. released on VHS. I guess it was before they were really popular, and he didn't want to take away from the experience of seeing a film in the theaters, and just was like not going to put E.T. out
ever.
Yeah, just was like not going to have it for home.
Yeah, I guess like we are just so accustomed to the way all of that is now, but I know there was a huge pushback against VHS and VCRs and being able to tape live TV by the industry, and now it's just so commonplace. But I feel like a lot of the TV industry and movie industry is trying to push back on that again, annoyingly. But yeah, things have kind of like gone in a cycle there. Yeah,
so I thought it was interesting when you were talking about like the DVD release, and then I was like, but wait, I thought I had a note about that. No, that was the VHS's 20 years beforehand, so it's crazy. And then my last note, which also I want to go back to and look at, is that apparently Drew Barrymore filmed a scene in the E.T. house almost 20 years later when she was filming Charlie's Angels in 2000, and like I know what scene it is. It's one of... I haven't seen the movie in a long time, but I saw one picture of it, and I can picture it from the movie. And if you look in the background for just a second, you can see an E.T. poster in the house.
That's funny.
So she wanted to pay tribute to the house that she, got her start in. And
I haven't seen Charlie's Angels in so long. I wonder if there's any reason why they're in that particular house.
Maybe just working in LA and happened to be there. But I loved that movie when it came out. I've seen it many, many times. That I'm really interested to go back and see that. So I thought it was really cool. So that's my fact snacks. And any other thoughts?
No, I don't think so. I mean, like I said, my main real thought thinking back was like just how much of it was actually sci-fi versus how much of it was just an alien being there. The pick with science fiction, there needs to be something beyond just like it almost, you could replace alien with like
a dog
or like demon or something like, or fairy or something like from a fantasy movie in that regard. But
yeah, I mean, I also feel like you could, like, they found a dog in his backyard and they keep, like, they're trying to hide it from the mom, and like I feel like you could very much make this like not even science fiction-y at all, except for the last like 10 minutes
when the scientists wanted to capture said dog.
Yeah, it was just a bunch of dog hunters. I mean, like, you can very much just remove the alien completely
for sure.
I don't know, except would the dog get drunk on the course?
Probably. Some dogs I'm sure have tried.
Oh, I'm sure. All right. So with that wraps up E.T. and we are going to move into what are we watching tonight?
Tonight we are watching The Terminator from 1984. It is rated R. And I can tell you from having seen it, it's supposed to be rated R.
I kind of figured. I was surprised just because I feel like we haven't had a R-rated movie in a really long time, just based on the genres and stuff we've been watching. But then as soon as I thought about it, I was like, oh, this movie's probably definitely rated R.
For sure. So let's hop back into our time machine. Back to 1984, where the top 3 movies released that year are Ghostbusters, grossing $220 million, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, grossing $179 million, and Gremlins, grossing $148 million. So Terminator not up there in the top 3. I don't know what part of the year it was released in, but it's not in that list. Although those are 3 pretty.
I don't think it was in the top 5 from one. I mean, I was the one that looked that up. But I did not actually look to see where it was.
The top 3 songs released that year, we got some bangers with When Doves Cry by Prince, What's Love Got to Do With It by Tina Turner, and Say 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 by Paul McCartney and Michael Jackson. Pretty big names there, some pretty big songs.
Yeah, packed top 3.
Have you seen Terminator before?
I have not, but I would also like to go on record for anybody that is binge listening to our podcast and listening to last week's and this week's back to back, where I said at the end of last week's episode, I can't wait for next week's. That's the one I'm most excited for. I forgot what movie we were watching next, and this is not the one that I'm most excited for. I'm sure it'll be fine. I'm just not crazy about Arnold Schwarzenegger in general. So that's like mostly what detracts from my excitement of this movie. But no, I have not seen it before.
Different in this movie than he is in Jingle All the Way. Bit different of a character.
Yes, and I've seen him in other things. I don't know. Not for me. Have you seen it before?
I have seen it before. I saw it as a kid, probably younger than I should have been when I watched it, but I was in it more for the action than anything else, and I remember absolutely loving it. I think I saw Terminator 2 before I saw Terminator 1, so I always thought it was kind of cool, like, be like, oh, that's where that's from, whenever they called back to the first one, seeing that. I know a lot about this movie, and I have not seen it, though, in probably 15 years. It's been a long time, but I used to watch it so much growing up.
I think that's something I learned about you today. I did not know that you've like loved this movie and you watched it so many times. Like
Really?
that's a brand new information
Number
for me.
2, definitely more than number 1. We had taped number 2, I believe. So I saw that one a lot more. And then I got number 1 for Christmas one year.
Interesting. Well, you learn something new every day.
What do you know about this movie?
I know that Arnold Schwarzenegger's in it.
That's it?
I think so. I assume it's science fiction-y.
Mm-hmm.
And there's definitely a famous quote from this that is, of course, not coming to me right now because you're putting me on the spot.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll be back. Is that this one?
Yes.
Okay. I was like, I know what this is, but I think that's it. Yeah, I know nothing else.
All right.
Terminator, so I assume there's going to be a lot of violence.
Yes. You are in for a treat.
Oh, God. When people tell me that I'm in for a treat with that kind of smile, it's usually like Blazing Saddles or something overwhelming.
Blazing Saddles was quite wild. No, this one, it's going to be very enjoyable for me, and I hope you like it too.
Okay, well, honestly, now at this point, I'm just excited to watch you watch the movie. But anyways, I guess that's it for the first part, and we will catch you after the Terminator.
Cheers. Cheers.
Cheers. That was the Terminator.
Terminator.
So how like satisfied are you? Like, are you feeling like is your cup runneth over?
It's great, but I will say this is one of the rare like scenarios where the sequel is better than the original.
Oh God, that means we're gonna have to watch it
sometime soon. It's great, and I love this so much because I didn't see this until after I'd seen number 2. So it's like for me, this more feels like a prequel. Mm-hmm. But Terminator 2 is very, very good.
All right. I'll take your word for it.
But before we get too deep into this, let's move into the wine. So the wine scale is a 0 to 10 scale. It's very subjective and heavily weighted because all the wines that we drink on this show are very good wines. So a low score does not necessarily mean that it is a bad wine because all these wines are very good. That being said, I rate this wine a 7.2.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
I was not expecting that from you. I give it a 6.1.
I was somewhere between a 6.8 and a 7.2, and I just really did enjoy it. It wasn't
to be fair, I finished my wine and I was like, oh no, I didn't put a number on it. So I tried to take like a little sip of yours so that I could put a score on it. And I think if I had like stopped between glasses and really thought about it, I would have come up with a better score. But that's where my score comes from mostly.
It was very enjoyable. It wasn't too alcohol forward. Wasn't too sour. Had a good like body to it. Good like berry, cherry, raspberry like jammy flavor to it that I like. So I would highly recommend the 2020 Paso Robles French Camp Vineyard Zinfandel.
Yes, I also recommend it. I thought it was very good. It was. I feel like we drink so much Zinfandel that in my mind I'm like, oh, I'm over Zinfandel. Like I don't want to drink it because that's something that we get a lot of. They have so many different vineyards and varietals of it. And then I drink one and I'm like, dang, that's a pretty good wine.
Right, like I feel when I'm drinking something like a Petit Verdot or a Cab Franc or something that's like a not traditional super popular wine, I'm like, okay, like I can feel confident being like, oh, you should try this particular fancy grape. When I have a really good like Cab Sav or Merlot or Zinfandel, I'm like, it's really good, but I don't feel as fancy saying that I highly recommend it.
I appreciate that.
Like these can be very good wines. Like there's a reason why these varietals are so popular and so well loved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was much better than I was anticipating.
Mm-hmm. So very much enjoyed that, especially over some of the ones we've had. Like still not a huge fan of the grains and those kind, but this very good. So moving on to the movie rating out of 10.
I'm going to give it a 5.8.
I'm going to give it an 8.1.
I was kind of hoping you were going to say 8.5 so that we would be inverse, but
yeah, I honestly,
but I appreciate your love of it.
I had not put a number to it until I was saying it out loud.
Hey, sometimes that's how I am too.
You just gotta feel like what from the gut.
It's a feeling. It's a gut feeling.
And then you go back and you try to justify it. Mm-hmm. So do you want to explain your rating first?
I did like it better than I thought I was going to. I do appreciate a good action movie. It's still not super my cup of tea, just in terms of general preference. I will probably not want to watch it really again. I guess I'm gonna have to watch the sequel, according to you. I mean, I know the quote, "I'll be back," but I don't know other than that how much more is really quotable from it.
I don't want to spoil too much about the sequel, but there are some callback quotes.
I'm sure there are.
Which is why it's higher.
But also, like, I think in my head, I had it like of you saying, like, you watched the second one first. And just so much of, like, from what I was, quick Wikipediaing between or while we were watching, it was like, I felt like it was a prequel and not a, like, original series. Just so much of, like, I came from the future and, like, you did all of this. It just so much felt like it was setting up so much that had already happened in, like, the real world, but, like, it was really the original of all of this.
Coming from Star Wars, it's kind of weird to do a prequel before the actual.
100%. 100%. But, I mean, it was fine. It was better than I was anticipating it being. I was really, like, before watching it, I was imagining coming in between, like, a 3 and a 4 on the scale. So being at a 5.8, almost 6.
Like, I enjoyed the movie. I think I enjoyed it way more as a kid, for a lot of reasons. But
was it all the butts?
No, it's more the boobs. But I just felt like it was enjoyable. I feel like it's pretty culturally significant with, like, some of the quotes and the lines. It's just some of how, like, the Terminator in Skynet especially is referenced a lot with AI taking over it nowadays. If it was on at any point, I would very much rewatch it. I love going back and rewatching the whole thing. And as for influencing pop culture, like, I feel like it's more now in the days of AI. Everyone wants to be like, oh, this whole AI ChatGPT is becoming the new Skynet. It's going to take over all the machines. Like, that to me is like, this is such a culturally significant movie that
makes more sense given who you are,
yeah,
and what you do.
Software engineer working on AI.
That tracks. For me, everyday citizen, not knowing too much about AI, not using ChatGPT or any of those things at all. I'm just kind of like, eh.
Yeah. Or I should say software engineer, having previously worked on AI and still obviously following it very much today. Yeah, it just feels very relevant. And there's a lot of jokes and references in my line about those kind of things.
I respect it.
So, movie description. I will go first.
Godspeed.
As always. A man gets sent back in time along with a cyborg where the cyborg is trying to kill a woman. The man is trying to protect the woman because she will one day give birth to the guy who will lead the humans in the war against machines in 2029.
All right.
And he has to save her.
I will say this is, like, I've heard the phrase cyborgs a lot, but I feel like this is where I really, like, understand what an actual cyborg is. I knew the term. I didn't truly know what it was, but I feel like I have a better understanding of a cyborg now. All right. The description, according to the TV, in the post-apocalyptic future, reigning tyrannical supercomputers teleport a cyborg assassin known as the Terminator back to 1984 to kill Sarah Connor, whose unborn son is destined to lead insurgents against 21st century mechanical hegemony. Hegemony. Sorry. Who? There's just, like, a lot of words, and there's a lot wordier than I was expecting.
It's a word I see, and I'm like, I'm sure that means something, but I don't know what that word means.
Yeah, sure. Meanwhile, the human... I'm sorry. How often do you see that word?
What?
Hegemony?
Hegemony? I don't know. It's one of those things where I'm like, I by context clues, I think I know what it means, but if someone asked me to define it, I would say I'm going to have to ask Google.
I'm going to have to say that this is, I'm certain, the first time I've ever come across that word in my life. Anyways, let me finish the description. Meanwhile, the human resistance movement dispatches a lone warrior to safeguard Sarah. Can he stop the virtually indestructible killing machines?
Find out on this episode of The Terminator.
Right? I love that this movie description ends in a question. I love that. That is the best one so far.
By the way, cyborg, I know he says it in the movie, but for those who did not pay attention or don't realize, cybernetic organism.
I heard him say that and I was like, I didn't even know it stood for something. Wow.
Just a word,
you hear a word and that's what it is.
Yep, exactly. comment below or add us somewhere if you understand where the reference is from.
Commonly used phrase in this house.
Very much. Was the movie what you expected? For me, yes. Seen it a bunch of times.
No, it was a lot more action-y than I was expecting.
Mm-hmm.
And I should have known that, like Arnold Schwarzenegger. I think we just like being so in this sci-fi zone. I was not expecting that as much.
Mm-hmm.
Just based on
more like terror or more just like science and stuff, like building a Terminator.
More like alien-y and
mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, I really truly knew nothing about this movie, so I had no expectations going into it. And I think kind of coming off on the like, you know, the doctors with ET trying to like, you know, saran wrap the whole house
mm-hmm.
and all the space stuff from the other ones. I don't know. I wasn't expecting as much action. This is
mm-hmm.
definitely the most like action of the movies we've watched so far. So I think it was just not I was really expecting.
I think this one was also more sciencey than ET, where they had like actual computers and some sort of like scientific backing to how this could happen. You know, they create some sort of like defense mechanism that is able to control the robots and eventually like become self-aware and does mm-hmm. all these things. It's like kind of gave some sort of background to it as opposed to aliens arrive.
Yeah, I agree.
How well did it age?
Well, based off of like my first or second note that says stop motion animation,
mm-hmm.
visually not super.
Mm-hmm.
That's, I mean, the other stuff like I'm sure we could still make today.
Yeah.
The fashion and the hair definitely dates it, but again, you could make a Terminator now, and they've been making Terminator sequels and
TV spinoffs and all that
for years.
Yeah, and we say this all the time, but being like a period piece would be like it takes place in like a supposed 1984 in this sci-fi reality, and that part I think was fine. It was more like you said, the stop motion claymation type animation where it just felt like in 4K remaster, and thank God they didn't do anything to make it look cringy like we referenced in the pre-show. Mm-hmm. That it just kind of was jarring, but I appreciate that to be like, oh, that was the extent of what they could do in 1984.
That was 1984, sure.
Or 1984 when this came out? Yeah, 1984. So I appreciate that. So I'm like, okay, they didn't rewrite history as the movie would like to do by CGIing it to make it look even better than it was.
I agree.
Because I do have memories of like the Terminator rising up at the end and coming out of the flames, and me being like, even on VHS in the like late 90s, early 2000s, being like, that looks pretty, you know, fake, whatever, mm-hmm. jarring.
Not believable.
The frame rate, they kind of changed that. I'm glad that still looked true to my memories. So thank you, James Cameron, for not George Lucasing. Could the movie be made today?
Sure.
Yeah. Back to 1984, and also they're making spinoffs today. Mm-hmm. Very much could be. I don't really see any super jarring issues. They might kind of try to work a little bit more technology and explanation into how these things happen based on what we know today.
Yes.
The fact that I
think there would be a lot more like explanation, like true mm-hmm. explanation of things.
And I feel like they'd kind of push the whole 2029 date a bit further, because 2029 is when the supposed machine uprising takes place, which honestly, based on the current AI, ChatGPT, if I'm being afraid of it, maybe not too far off.
Oh God, I'm not sleeping in tonight.
It's got a couple more years. Did they say the title of the movie in the movie?
Yes.
A couple times. The Terminator and Terminator.
It was not as like egregious as some of the other mm-hmm. titles, but they do call him the Terminator.
Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense too. Does the title fit the movie?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you could call it like Cyborg 2029
I was going
or
to say something
like
with
that.
cyborgs.
But I think the Terminator sounds pretty great. It is kind of cringy though when you think about it, being like the Terminator just kind of seems like a weird cringy label for this thing. That maybe like something more like Cyborg.
I feel like Arnold Schwarzenegger would probably have appreciated it if it was something other than the Terminator. Because I feel like that's just like what he probably gets yelled at the most. Mm-hmm. And I think that would get old really fast.
Yeah. But I can't really think of too many other better titles for the movie. It's become such an iconic one that doesn't seem too far off. So yeah, pretty great title. Were there any actors that went on to do bigger things?
I mean, I don't know. Where was this in Arnold Schwarzenegger's career?
Right,
like,
I think it was fairly probably early in his
that's what I career.
Assume. He's at least done a lot after this. Michael Bain, is that how you pronounce his last name? has been in a bunch of other like sci-fi actiony things.
I know the name, but like I couldn't place him.
I've seen him in a couple of things like throughout the years and been like, he looks really familiar, and looked it up and that's who it was. So he's been in other things, not anything too as big as this, from what I know. Linda Hamilton went on to marry James Cameron, and also a very young Bill Paxton was in the opening scene as like almost a cameo. So they got the blue hair. They got beat up and took his clothes, or didn't take his clothes. What was the one of the guys there?
So you asked if I recognized him, but you didn't ever follow through with that. And I was like, he looks familiar. Mm-hmm. And then you didn't say anything else. And I was just like, okay. Yeah. And then we were moved on. And
it was just weird to me because as a kid, I watched this movie a lot around the time that we watched like Twister and other like movies. And seeing him as that, I'm like, but why does he play this really weird, like he's on screen for like 20 seconds in Terminator? And I guess it was just really early on in his career.
We have to watch Twister.
Such a great movie.
Stick around at some point soon, hopefully, because that movie haunts my childhood.
We did find a good like theme for that season, like natural disasters, and watch.
You're gonna like spark anxiety in me if you do.
Yeah, I mean, I got a couple ideas, but like, yeah.
That one. There's a couple movies that I need to see as an adult that just like completely wrecked me as a child, and that I need to see, and I just need to like maybe use this as like therapy to work through some childhood angst.
I think we might need a special guest for that episode for Twister, though. Stay tuned. What impact do you think this movie had on pop culture? I think we kind of covered that already.
Yeah, I mean, like
Skynet, I'll be back. AI, I'll be back.
I have not heard of Skynet until you, so
it's like
I'm sure it's a thing for you. It's not
AI
a thing in my realm, but
yeah, and just an overall great action movie. Like I said, Terminator 2 also is an amazing movie that also references or builds a lot on this a lot.
And like I had never seen it. I didn't know anything about this movie, but I didn't know of it. I was aware that it existed. It's not like it was something I'd never heard of. Like Blazing Saddles was just out of nowhere for me. I was aware of it. I know it was a thing. I think too, like it was not so much before our time. I mean, it was before our time, but like it was still kind of relevant in pop culture that I knew of it. I don't know how much. I guess they did continue like with series and stuff that is probably still a part of stuff today. But
there's Terminator 3, Terminator Salvation, Terminator the TV show.
Yeah, the Sarah Connor Chronicles.
Yeah. Do you feel cultured after watching it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now you can at least say that you've seen
I've seen the Terminator.
It's just weird because I remember like watching this, it's like, here comes the line, and you're like, okay, that's it. When he says, "I'll be back," I'm like, yeah, but it's still pretty cool. He like drives a car through the whole window. And I
mean, my direct quote is, "I'll be back" is a disappointment. That's literally my note.
I seeing for the first time when you're like a teenage boy in the movie theater, and he's just like in there, and he goes, "I'll be back," and then suddenly a car drives through there so unexpectedly. Pretty intense, pretty cool line. I just feel like the theme of the season is like, well, when you were a boy, or when you're a teenage boy, you appreciate this. And I'm watching sci-fi from the 80s. Like, it's not geared towards I've only ever been a girl, so I only ever have my own experiences, and this is all not for me. There'll be some more that I think you'll enjoy after this. But yes, I appreciate where you're coming from with all of your thoughts and feelings. I personally have not experienced them. Yes, you're getting cultured in my culture as a boy. They grew up and in the 80s. That's 90s. All I need. So that ends our culture questionnaire. Whose turn is it to go first? I went first for Star Wars, so I think it's my turn to go first. Okay. So my first note is, I love when we write these in our true thoughts and not just try to like phrase them nicely. Because my first note is 2029. Ew. A little too close to home there. That's just like really soon. And just like, I mean, I'm sure at the time people were like, oh my gosh, that's like super far off time. Right. But it just... Think about 2001: A Space Odyssey. They were like, oh man, that's so far away. And then people are like, wait a second, 2001 isn't that far. Let's do another 28 years after that. And nowadays, like, it's pretty close. That's like really close to now. I remember having a deep discussion with my brother when we were younger about like 2029, I will be about 39, then be a good like fighting age for the war against machines, and realizing like, this is assuming this is all going to happen. Like we were getting prepared for this. As a kid, you can never be too prepared for these kind of things. I love knowing these things about you. That's so good. And these conversations happened completely seriously. There was no I doubt
I have no doubt that it was
there was
so
no
serious.
like this won't happen. It was very much like okay, this would be good.
I'll be
age.
ready.
Yeah, I won't be too young, but won't be too old. I'll be seasoned. Like good fighting age for the war against machines.
Anyways, my next note is stop animation for the futuristic. Like it is so cringy because we are living in today's age where everything looks still not super real, but like realistic enough. And just this ship slowly turning into I
think they probably get on some of these things better with like just some puppets and models like they did for Star Wars. But I think James Cameron is known for really pushing the envelope of the computer animation CGI. And at the time it was probably way more mind blowing. But also now looking at it and how well that ages versus actual scale models. And when you have like the raw footage of something, I don't think it ages fully as well as something like real-ish could look.
I was just
but I
more
appreciate him
impressed.
pushing the envelope.
I mean, I love that it was the original content and nothing remastered. I also appreciated that I was able to recognize that it was like a stop motion animation thing. Probably because when I was a teacher, I did stop motion animation with my students. So, going from people using it in movies to like 10-year-olds using it, whatever. My next note is butts. There were a lot of butts that butts in like the first like 2 to 5 minutes that I just was not prepared for.
I'm pretty sure you also see Arnold's ball sack waddling around for like a half frame.
Yeah. You see it. I pretended I didn't. And I just was not ready for that. Is that something that was more common back in the 80s? I feel like we don't see as many butts.
Yeah, I think butts was kind of like still, I mean, this is obviously rated R, so they were just going to do whatever they wanted then. I think butts were a little less harmful. They showed a couple nips that I think kind of balanced out the whole butts in the beginning, but it was
Nips and butts.
It was very butt heavy in the opening scenes.
Yeah. I was like, oh, maybe this is what he was talking about with the it's just there's just some butts.
This is why we all loved the movie as
right
kids.
off the bat.
Bunch of guy butts.
Yeah. Just was not ready for that. My next note is the future scenes look like the Zord fights on the Power Rangers. There was one scene where I was just like, I think I'm watching the Power Rangers right now. The Zords are coming out. They're obviously in some kind of like weird scale model, not realistic situation.
And the weird like stage because the background doesn't blend as well into the, it's like, okay, you see a whole bunch of like stuff here in the foreground and then it's just sky in the background.
Yep. It just didn't look super realistic. That's fine because it was supposed to be in a futuristic society that does not currently exist. So I'll appreciate it. Just needed yet another. I feel like we reference Power Rangers a lot. So just calling that back again.
Do a full season on all of Power Rangers.
I can't. I love it. I loved it, but like I can't. My next note is no LA traffic. I mean, they're just zooming through the streets. There are no other people.
I mean, they don't say what time of day it is, but I also feel like LA would.
I imagine it's
probably pretty gridlocked all the time.
Always gridlocked, but it would have to be like 3 a.m. For them to be able to maneuver as many times as they do through the streets without the car chases.
We're very East Coast, not big city people, so we don't know necessarily what LA like downtown area is like. But
I hear enough from enough celebrities on their podcasts being like, well, LA traffic, blah, 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 that I can't imagine.
Yeah, there's not really a time that you're just zipping down all around all these streets and there's just one car on the road.
Yeah, and just like firing guns everywhere. No, thank you. Okay, and then my last note that I've already mentioned is I'll be back as a disappointment. I don't know. I had heard it many times, and especially, I guess, when Arnold Schwarzenegger was running for governor, I'm sure that was like out and about a lot. But I don't know. I was expecting a bigger scene, a bigger deal.
I mean, that line to me, like, I know it's like the big like Terminator like line, but I think there's more lines in this just based on some of like the callbacks they have in later movies that speak more to me. But I think it's not necessarily the line. It's more that he just so casually is like, I'll be back, and then just drives a car through the whole window. And it's like so jarring of like, it's not like he didn't come back.
Yeah.
If you think he's coming back with guns or, whatever, it's a bit different.
So when I typed that, he had not yet come back in with the car. So I was like, okay, I get it with the car. Yeah. It's still, I was expecting more of like the whole city's burning down and he's like standing on top of it with some kind of.
No, it's like, you know, when we're watching like football and like I'm just like sitting there cheering for like scores and points and just want all that. Watching action movies, a lot of times you just want to like cheer for like carnage and chaos and destruction and, you know, all of that. That you're watching this movie and he says, I'll be back so casually. And then he comes back and just, you know, car drives through this and launches into this crazy action sequence where he's, you know, mowing down people left and right. You're just like cheering for just the overall carnage. You're not on the side of the police or the cyborg. You just want more carnage. I think that's where it's so exciting for like, you know, teenage boys and just guys in general to be like, yes, I'll be back. Blow up everything.
Yeah, but I was like definitely on the side of the cops. I mean, I was following you, and then you're like, you're not on the side of the cops, and I was like, no, but I was watching that, and I was definitely like, but all these cops, they were just helping her, they're just dead, like
couldn't go back to their day jobs.
Nope. That
what I didn't understand is like tons of cops in that police station have tried to like shoot this guy down, gunshots going off the left and right, and obviously not doing anything, and then all these cops keep jumping out from behind a wall, being like, hey. Like, why would you first announce your presence? And why would you just like, stand there after you shot him and not just be like, I'm firing off 3 rounds and like hiding back behind a wall or something? Do you think that your bullet was magical? It was going to make the difference? That like they hadn't also tried the same thing? They all just missed or...
And I think that's why action sci-fi movies upset me. Because I'm like, it's like horror movies. Everybody makes really bad choices and it really frustrates me. And I would be hidden somewhere quiet as can be for like days until the storm had passed and I felt safe enough to leave. I would not wait 3 seconds and then like... Pew, pew, pew.
Yeah, and also it's like you look back and they obviously did not know that he was actually a real cyborg. They would probably just be like, oh my God, I'm going to shoot him in the head. And like everyone else must be hitting him in the body armor. But after a while, I'd be like, yeah, I'm just getting out of this whole precinct and leaving.
That's why I'm not a cop.
And I think nowadays, if something similar happened where like you're a cop, you shoot someone like that and they just don't move, you'd be like, okay, they're clearly an alien, cyborg, robot, something. I'm going to go ahead. I'm not going to keep trying. I'm not questioning it.
Enough sci-fi movies to know that I am not messing around with this.
That's the reality we're living in and we're gone. So let's...
Yes, that wraps up my notes. It's on to you.
Let's move on to my notes. My first being obviously the Bill Paxton cameo or role in the very beginning as kind of a nobody rando. Next note is the unsettling techno. I feel like was really well played. I don't really know if it was, you could consider it like a orchestra or anything like that. It was just a lot of like really futuristic sounding stuff, but it also gave such an unsettling feeling that I thought it was really well played.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely no John Williams, but I commented out loud about it. I think on at least more than one occasion that it like unsettled you and you were like, well, of course she's suspicious. They're playing that music. She's of course looking around because they're setting the scene.
And the weird feeling that I don't know if you know who really composed the who composed the Terminator theme, but that was great. But the overall just ambient noise and music that they had was really great for feeling that dread. My next note is about her middle name not being in the files, but they explain that later in that they didn't have full information or something like that. The roommate, Ginger, who gets killed. The Terminator just opens the sliding door and there's no one, like no locks or anything like that. I know it's the 80s and people were just more lax with security, but I think anyone at night should just be locking their doors. And it just blew my mind that she was like, oh, there's a murder on the loose. They've been talking about on the news and all these sort of things. And she's just like, in LA, just being like, yeah, I'm just not going to leave my door open. I'm just going to lay in here in bed and just no protection.
Yeah. And I feel like I should have known that she was going to die from like when they were getting ready and she had her headphones on. I feel like that's like such a red flag.
Horror movie type thing.
Yep. I've watched enough horror movies in my teenage years that I feel like I should have red flagged that and been like, oh, well, she's obviously going to have those on later and not hear anything. Also, the fact that she had them on while they were banging, I was like, girl, I know you love this song, but
nowadays kids probably have their AirPods in.
Oh, God. That's such a disappointment.
Got to always have that information popping in, whether it's music, listen to podcasts.
I mean, I listen to a lot of audiobooks and a lot of podcasts, but like, there's a limit.
What gets her off, man? My next note was the AI voice cloning. They didn't have much like material to go off of. He hears the cop talking and it suddenly is able to imitate his voice in the radio, is able to imitate the mom's voice later on. I think that in the moment and like watching this growing up seemed like it was way too futuristic. Now with all the AI voice coding they have now, it takes a little bit more training data to really get a realistic, not uncanny valley feeling AI, but that's becoming way more closer to reality than I think I thought up until very recently.
I don't know that I have a lot of thoughts on that. I don't know as much as you. I'm not as like plugged into that situation as you. As me, I was like, okay, he was like, he heard the cop talking into the thing. He said his thing. Sure. He obviously broke in and killed the mom.
And then she gives the mom like the full address. There's a murderer after me. I ain't calling anyone.
I mean, I know this is technically like an action sci-fi movie, but like this movie had so much like of the horror movie tropes of like, let me do the dumbest thing I can possibly do so that I can die. Right.
It's the 80s. You can't track her cell phone. Like once she's out of, hearing radius, she should be basically gone. And all these times they just keep finding ways to pop back up into his scope or anything. And he's able to track her down. Like in that time, you should be able to disappear pretty easily.
I think that was one of the most unbelievable things for me. It was like, I just don't understand how you can't in LA, Los Angeles, so many people, you can't just disappear. There's no cell phones. There's none of this stuff that we carry around with us all the time that is trackable.
It would have made more sense if he had if they'd shown him instead of like talking as the mom, whatever, and he's like got his finger injected into the phone. He's like tracing where the phone call is. That to me, as dumb as it sounds, would have been more believable than her just after all this stuff being like, okay, mom, I shouldn't tell anyone, but I'm going to tell you my exact room number in this motel for no reason in case you need me. Like, I don't know why.
Do you think you're going to be in that hotel for an extended period of time?
Right.
No. Like, you're definitely going to be on the move.
And I thought it was funny that the Terminator then had to call the motel to ask what their address was. Kind of dates that a little bit.
Definitely dates the movie.
My next note was the eyebrows. I always knew growing up watching as the movie went on that the Terminator himself, Arnold Schwarzenegger, looked less human and kind of weird after a couple scenes. And I didn't realize until watching it now that in one of the first scenes he catches on fire and his eyebrows burn off. And they just look so weird from then on, and then it becomes less human as like his eye gets all messed up and when it becomes slowly more
that was so bad. Like that was really bad when they would show his face that was clearly not his face. It was definitely
when he cuts his eyeball out.
Yeah. Oh god, that's what aged the movie. I mean, honestly, worse than the like stop motion stuff. It was that where it was like that is clearly not you. Pulling your eyeball out.
Yeah, it didn't look as bad on VHS from what I remember. It didn't look great, but it didn't look that bad.
Not a great match.
I had a note that I thought it was funny that Kyle Reese volunteered to go back essentially and like put himself into this and went through all this essentially because he saw her picture one time and was like, I fell in love with that picture. And I'm like, in the future where you're basically fighting robots all the time, he sees one girl ever and he's like, he's just the horn dog. He's like, I gotta go back in time and I got to like meet this woman. So it was a crappy Polaroid, and I think that's all he had to go off of.
That was like the least believable plot. Not the fact that they're cyborgs and sent back in time. Like
John Connor gave me this Polaroid from how many ever years ago, and like I loved that, and I just fell in love, and I had to go back to save you. I guess that's all you have. Like that's all you have. My next note was the frame rate. They obviously looked pretty jarring in some of the stop motion stuff where it didn't fully match the actual frame rate of the rest of the movie, where it just kind of like felt pretty jarring. But then later in some scenes, like when he's on the motorcycle, they kept speeding up the frame rate and making it like seem faster. And I think they did in some earlier scenes too, just to play with that. And I thought it was an interesting choice. I don't think that aged as well as maybe it did at the time because it felt more obvious nowadays watching the remastered version where he's like riding the motorcycle and riding and also it just like jumps forward a whole bunch.
I feel like I should be able to notice the difference because I edit so many videos and do a lot of things with frame rates. I did not notice it at all.
It's like
and then you were like, oh, they jumped frame rate. And I was like, oh yeah. I did not notice.
And by that I mean it's like when you're watching old timey film and everyone's moving too fast in the old timey because it was filmed in like 12 FPS and never watching it in 24. It was that kind of thing where it was moving unnaturally fast.
I mean, I think retroactively, I was like, okay, I kind of understand what he's talking about, but like it was not something that obviously jumped out to me. I also am not sitting there watching or looking for it or really thinking about it. I'm trying to just like take in everything.
It did play well in some,
but I think I feel like I should notice it because I do so much of that in all of my own video editing that I should know, but I don't.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting because it did play well in some parts to say, oh, like this is a unhuman robot that doesn't move like at human speeds or in human ways. It gave that like really jarring, like used Uncanny Valley, I thought, in a really great way to say. Uncanny Valley, for those who aren't aware, is when something doesn't look quite real enough and it kind of like breaks your mind, and where it's like you can tell that it's fake, but it feels like it should be real type way.
It's one of his favorite things to talk about.
The Terminator was moving and it just didn't seem like it should be real or how it would move. But I think that is what that's the effect they were basically trying to achieve there. So I appreciated that, but also it still didn't look great. And then my final note was props to Skynet for all the redundant systems within the Terminator. Like, it gets blown up, it gets bashed around, it gets knocked over, legs torn off, bunch of wires hanging out, and that thing is still able to move and crawl around. Like, nowadays, you drop something, like you drop your phone wrong, and it like never boots up again. That
was also something that was like very unbelievable to me. Is I understand, like this technology growing, and I can see where that is maybe believable. But the fact that like he gets like smushed and then it's still going, like that was all, like you said, like you drop your phone, it just doesn't work again. Yeah. You drop something the wrong way, and this thing is like smushed. It is shot at. It is all the things
burned. There's like nowadays there's minor software glitches, and like your TV just stops working.
Back to all of our space movies. One particle of dust gets in a space station, and like done.
And it's also funny thinking about the way that the Terminator moves, and the most modern robots that we have now that are like humanoid, that move like humans. I saw a comment where if you watch a video of them walking around and moving, like it's pretty impressive how these robotic things are able to like move, jump around, like people can push them, they maintain their balance. They look kind of like humanish in the way they're shaped, but they all walk like they crap their pants. Because that gives them the best like center of gravity to kind of squat down and like move around. But like it's so much like these are supposed to be like really cool, like cutting edge robot things. And you're like, that robot just crapped its pants the way that it's kind of like just waddling around.
Exactly what you're talking about.
That I kept watching this being like, okay, at some point we're going to solve that problem and they're going to look like cool, menacing robots again. I mean, I say again, but like again, as in like what we saw in CGI and in the past. That I thought it was cool. I'm like, okay, Skynet, they've solved the whole crapping your pants walking problem, and also now if there's like some system goes down, it's still able to do its thing and try to achieve its goal and move and stay online.
That was a note I was not expecting to go the way it went, but here we are.
So that is the end of my notes, though.
Well done. All right, so with that, that is the Terminator.
Yep. If you liked the episode, please like, subscribe, ring the notification bell, rate and review, all the things, whatever platform you are viewing this on or listening.
If you have any thoughts or comments on this movie or any suggestions about what we should watch next, feel free to leave them in the comments or send us an email at culturenightpod@gmail.com. If you're not following us on Instagram at culturenightpod, head over to Instagram and give us a follow, like our reels, share your thoughts.
If you think we should watch Terminator 2 very soon, let us know. I think
if you think that like Sarah's had enough, then you can say, I think Sarah's good. It's whatever you want. Anyways, we will be back next week with yet another sci-fi movie, and we are excited to just keep plugging through the season. So we will catch you next time. Cheers.